Nola lived with her husband Kofi in a peaceful African neighborhood where mornings arrived with birds singing and warm sunlight spilling across the streets. She owned a small tailoring shop filled with colorful fabrics and handmade dresses. People loved her work because she stitched every design with care. Every evening after work, she returned home tired but happy. And every night, Kofi prepared the same tea. Red hibiscus tea. He always smiled while handing it to her. "Drink this," he would say softly. "It helps you sleep." Nola smiled every time. Because after her mother's passing, Kofi had become her comfort. Her support. Her safe place. The steam from the tea carried a warm scent through the room. A familiar scent. A comforting scent. A scent she slowly connected with love. And every night after drinking it, she slept deeply. Very deeply. Too deeply. At first she thought nothing of it. Because sometimes danger doesn't enter your life looking dangerous. Sometimes it arrives wearing kindness. Weeks later, strange things started happening. Nola began waking up feeling exhausted. Her head hurt every morning. Her body felt heavy. Sometimes she woke up close to noon. At first she blamed stress. Maybe work was becoming too much. Maybe she missed her mother more than she realized. But then something else started happening. Her memory felt different. Small things disappeared from her mind. One morning she stood in the kitchen holding a spoon and suddenly froze. For several seconds she couldn't remember why she walked there. She stared silently. Confused. Kofi noticed immediately. He walked toward her and placed a hand gently on her shoulder. "Nola." She looked at him. "You've been forgetting things lately." His voice sounded full of concern. "You should rest more." Nola nodded slowly. But a strange feeling quietly appeared inside her heart. Fear. One morning Nola opened her tailoring shop earlier than usual. Sunlight passed through colorful Ankara curtains and spread beautiful patterns across the floor. Everything felt normal. Until a young woman entered smiling. "Nola," she said happily. "My wedding dress, is it ready?" Nola smiled automatically. Then suddenly, her mind became completely empty. Wedding dress. What wedding dress? She stared at the woman. Nothing. No memory. No measurements. No conversation. Nothing. For several painful seconds she stood frozen. Then forced a smile. "Come back this afternoon." The woman smiled and left. The moment the door closed, Nola quickly grabbed her other book. Her hands shook as she searched through the pages. Then her heart dropped. The woman's name was there. Measurements. Details. Due date. Everything written clearly. In her own handwriting. Nola sat down slowly. Because she wasn't forgetting small things anymore. She was forgetting pieces of her life. Days later, more strange things happened. Nola couldn't find her silver bracelet. Then earrings disappeared. Then jewelry her mother had given her. At first she blamed herself. Maybe she misplaced them. Maybe she forgot. But one night she opened a small wooden box where she kept her second wedding ring. Empty. Nola stared silently. Her breathing became heavier. Because this wasn't normal. Slowly a cold feeling moved through her chest. That evening Kofi handed her tea again. Nola looked at him carefully. "Kofi." He smiled. "Yes." "Have you seen my ring?" For several seconds he said nothing. Then slowly stirred his tea. "You forgot again." Nola looked at him. "You've been very forgetful lately." He sighed. "Maybe you should see a doctor." Something about his voice felt strange. Very strange. Not concern. Almost certainty. That night Nola couldn't sleep. Kofi slept peacefully beside her. But her mind refused to rest. She stared toward the ceiling for hours. Thinking. Remembering. Questioning. Then the next morning she bought a small notebook. Nothing expensive. Just a simple notebook. And she started writing everything. Wake-up times. Customers. Conversations. Daily events. Every tiny detail. At first it felt unnecessary. But after 3 days, Nola discovered something terrifying. What she remembered and what she wrote didn't match. Conversations existed in her notebook that she couldn't remember having. Events happened that completely disappeared from her memory. She sat inside her shop staring at those pages. Hands shaking. Heart pounding. Then slowly one thought entered her mind. A thought that changed everything. What if the problem isn't me? Nola sat inside her tailoring shop staring at the notebook in her hands. The pages didn't lie. Her own handwriting stared back at her. Conversations. Orders. Meetings. Things she clearly wrote herself. But somehow, her mind remembered nothing. Outside, people walked past the shop normally. Cars moved. Voices echoed through the street. Life looked ordinary. But inside Nola's chest, everything felt different. For the first time she stopped asking, "What's wrong with me?" and started asking, "What's happening to me?" That evening she walked home more slowly than usual. Her thoughts felt heavy. Questions kept circling inside her mind. When she entered the house, Kofi stood in the kitchen smiling. "You're home." Nola forced a smile. "Yes." Then Kofi held out a familiar cup. Red hibiscus tea. Steam slowly rose into the air. Nola stared at it silently. Because suddenly, something felt wrong. Very wrong. That night Nola sat quietly holding the cup. She stared into the dark red liquid. The steam touched her face gently. Her eyes narrowed. Then suddenly, a thought appeared. Every time she forgot things. Every time she woke up exhausted. Every time her memories felt broken. It happened after drinking the tea. Nola's heartbeat became faster. No. That couldn't be true. Kofi loved her. Kofi cared for her. Kofi stayed beside her after her mother died. Kofi wouldn't hurt her. Would he? She slowly looked toward him. He sat comfortably on the sofa scrolling through his phone. Calm. Relaxed. Perfect. Too perfect. Nola looked back at the cup. For the first time, she felt afraid of something she once called comfort. Nola lifted the cup slowly toward her mouth. Kofi looked up. His eyes moved toward her. Watching. Waiting. Her hands trembled slightly. Then suddenly she pretended to cough. She lowered the cup and placed it beside her. "Are you okay?" Kofi asked. Nola forced a weak smile. "My throat feels strange." Kofi stared at her for several seconds. Longer than usual. Then smiled again. "You should still drink it later." Nola nodded softly. But after Kofi left the room, she stood up quietly. Walked toward the kitchen. And poured the tea into the sink. The dark red liquid disappeared slowly down the drain. Nola stared silently. Because that was the first time she had ever lied to her husband. And strangely, it didn't feel wrong. It felt necessary. The next morning sunlight entered the room. Nola slowly opened her eyes. Then immediately sat upright. No headache. No exhaustion. No heavy feeling. Nothing. She looked toward the clock. Early morning. Normal morning. For several seconds she simply sat there. Confused. Because she couldn't remember the last time she woke up feeling normal. Then suddenly fear rushed through her. Her hands became cold. Because if skipping one cup changed everything, then what exactly had she been drinking? Outside, Kofi called from the kitchen. Nola. Her body froze. Breakfast is ready. Nola stared silently toward the doorway. Because now, she wasn't only afraid of the tea. She was beginning to fear the person making it. That night Kofi prepared the tea again. Same cup. Same smile. Same soft voice. You need rest. Nola looked at him carefully. Then looked down at the cup. Weeks earlier she would have accepted it without thinking. Without questioning. Without fear. But now everything felt different. She smiled gently. Thank you. Then took the cup into her hands. Inside, her mind was no longer confused. No longer weak. No longer sleeping. She had made a decision. She wasn't going to ask questions. She wasn't going to confront him. Not yet. First, she needed answers. Because somewhere behind Kofi's smile, a truth was hiding. And Nola was finally ready to find it. The next morning Nola waited near the front door. Kofi adjusted his shirt, picked up his keys, and smiled at her. I'll be back early today. Nola smiled back. Okay. She watched him leave. Then waited. 1 minute. 2 minutes. 5 minutes. Finally, the sound of his car disappeared down the road. Silence filled the house. Nola stood still for several seconds. Her heartbeat grew faster. Because what she was about to do felt wrong. Very wrong. But fear had become stronger than guilt. She slowly walked toward Kofi's car parked outside. Her hands trembled while opening the trunk. At first, nothing looked unusual. A toolbox. Old shoes. Fabric rolls. Normal things. But as she reached deeper inside, her fingers touched something hidden beneath the lining. Something hard. Something that wasn't supposed to be there. Slowly she pulled it out. A tiny glass bottle. Inside was a dark blue liquid. No label. No writing. Nothing. Nola stared at it silently. And suddenly the air felt colder. Nola wrapped the small bottle carefully inside cloth and hurried toward a nearby clinic. The streets felt longer than usual. Every person passing her suddenly looked distant. Every sound felt louder. Inside the clinic stood an older woman who once knew Nola's mother. Nola, she asked with surprise. Nola forced a smile. I need help. She placed the vial on the table. I want this tested. The woman looked confused but nodded. It may take 2 days. 2 days. 48 hours. Nola nodded and walked away. But those 48 hours felt endless. She barely slept. Barely ate. Every night Kofi still handed her tea. Every night she smiled. Pretended. Acted normal. And every night fear sat beside her. Because sometimes waiting for the truth feels scarier than the truth itself. 2 days later Nola returned to the clinic. The older woman looked serious. Too serious. Nola, she said quietly. Nola's heart immediately dropped. The woman slowly looked at the report. This substance is a strong sedative. Silence. Nola stared at her. The woman continued carefully. In small amounts it causes deep sleep. She paused. And memory loss. Nola felt the room spinning. Her breathing suddenly became shallow. No. The woman looked at her sadly. But long-term use could become dangerous. Nola couldn't hear anything else. Because only one sentence repeated inside her mind. Memory loss. Everything suddenly connected. The headaches. The exhaustion. The missing memories. The confusion. The tea. Kofi. And suddenly the world she trusted no longer existed. That evening Kofi stood in the kitchen again. Preparing tea. Smiling. Exactly like always. Nothing had changed. But everything had changed. Nola watched him quietly. Weeks ago that smile made her feel safe. Now it made her feel cold. He walked toward her and handed her the cup. You should drink early tonight. He smiled warmly. So you can rest. Nola looked into his eyes. And suddenly she saw something she never noticed before. Not kindness. Not love. Control. For the first time she didn't see her husband. She saw someone waiting for her to disappear. Nola smiled back gently. Then accepted the cup. Because now, the game had changed. That night Nola sat alone beside the window. Rain tapped softly against the glass. The cup of tea sat untouched beside her. She stared out into the darkness. She could run. She could scream. She could confront Kofi. But something inside her said no. Running would leave questions. Questions could leave danger behind. Slowly Nola opened her notebook. Then wrote one sentence. If he thinks I know nothing. She paused. Then continued writing. I'll let him keep believing it. She closed the notebook slowly. Because tonight, Nola stopped being the victim. And started becoming the hunter. That night Nola stood quietly inside the kitchen doorway. Kofi prepared the tea exactly the way he always did. Steam rose softly from the red hibiscus tea. The sound of the spoon tapping the cup echoed through the room. Everything looked normal. Too normal. Kofi turned and smiled. Here. Nola accepted the cup. Her heart pounded hard against her chest. This wasn't because she was afraid anymore. It was because tonight she was doing something dangerous. Very dangerous. She raised the cup toward her lips. Then suddenly coughed and bent forward slightly. Just 1 second. One tiny movement. So small nobody would notice. The cup switched. Kofi looked at her. You okay? Nola smiled weakly. Just tired. Minutes later Kofi sat on the sofa and drank slowly. Nola watched him carefully. 10 minutes passed. 20 minutes. 30 minutes. Then Kofi rubbed his eyes. I feel strange. He whispered. Nola looked at him silently. Because for the first time, he was walking into his own trap. Kofi stood up slowly. His movements looked heavier. His eyes blinked repeatedly. He touched his forehead. I feel tired. Nola looked at him with calm eyes. You should rest. Kofi nodded and walked unsteadily toward the sofa. Minutes later he fell asleep. Completely asleep. Nola stared at him silently. Her heart felt strange. She expected victory. Relief. Satisfaction. Instead, she felt sadness. Because the man sleeping there was once the person she trusted more than anyone. The person she thought would protect her. She sat beside the table and opened her notebook. Then slowly wrote. Night 1, I didn't drink the tea. She paused. Then wrote. Night 1, Kofi did. Days passed. Nola continued pretending. Smiling. Acting normal. Switching the cups. And slowly, Kofi began changing. One morning he walked through the house confused. Nola. She looked up. Yes. Have you seen my phone? Nola stared silently. Because the phone sat directly in his hand. Kofi looked down. His face changed. Oh. He laughed nervously. Later he forgot important appointments. Forgot conversations. Forgot where he left things. Nola watched quietly. Because now she was seeing exactly what had been happening to her. But unlike Kofi, she wasn't confused anymore. She finally knew the truth. One afternoon Nola entered her tailoring shop after closing. Something felt strange. Very strange. Her eyes slowly moved around the room. Then suddenly, she froze. The security camera near the ceiling looked different. Only slightly. But enough. It had moved. Nola slowly stepped closer. Then noticed something reflecting light nearby. A tiny hidden camera. Carefully placed. Watching her workspace. Watching her movements. Watching her life. Her breathing became heavier. Then she looked around again. And found another one. Suddenly everything became clear. Kofi wasn't only trying to make her forget. Someone wanted proof. Proof that she was losing her mind. And suddenly one terrifying thought entered her mind. Kofi wasn't walking alone. 2 days later Nola's cousin Amina visited the shop. She carried food and smiled warmly. Nola. She sat beside her. I heard you haven't been feeling well. Nola smiled politely. I'm okay. As they talked, Nola noticed something strange. Amina's eyes kept moving around the room. Looking toward the hidden cameras. Just for a second. But it was enough. Then Amina gently held her hand. You should let Kofi help you. Nola looked at her. Amina smiled softly. Sometimes people lose control and need someone else to manage things. Nola felt cold. Very cold. Because suddenly everything connected. The cameras. The tea. The missing memories. Kofi. And now, Amina. The cousin she trusted like a sister. The betrayal hurt more than the fear. Because enemies are easier to fight. But betrayal always wears a familiar face. Nola knew the time had come. For weeks she had watched. Waited. Recorded. Pretended. And now the people who thought they controlled her were preparing for the final step. That evening Kofi placed several papers on the dining table. Under the warm yellow light, the pages looked endless. Legal documents. Property transfer forms. Medical papers. Control agreements. Everything looked official. Everything looked perfect. Kofi smiled softly. You just need to sign. Nola lowered her eyes and stared at the papers. Her hands shook slightly. Not from fear. From anger. Because now she understood everything. The tea. The memory loss. The cameras. The lies. The land her mother left behind. None of it happened by accident. Kofi slowly touched her shoulder. You've been struggling lately. He smiled gently. I'll take care of everything. Nola almost laughed. Because now she finally understood. Some people don't help you because they love you. Some help you because they want control. As Nola stared at the papers, another voice suddenly came from behind. The sooner she signs, the better. Nola slowly looked up. Amina stood near the doorway. Calm. Comfortable. Like she belonged there. But she wasn't alone. A man wearing glasses entered behind her carrying a small leather bag. Nola stared silently. Kofi smiled. This is the doctor. Doctor. The word hit her chest like ice. Everything suddenly became clear. This wasn't only about property anymore. They wanted official proof. Proof that Nola was mentally unstable. Proof that she couldn't control her own life. Nola lowered her eyes again. Inside, anger burned quietly. Because now the entire trap stood in front of her. Every person. Every lie. Every betrayal. Together. Nola slowly picked up the pen. Kofi watched closely. Amina smiled slightly. The doctor adjusted his glasses. Nola let her hands shake. She looked confused. Weak. Lost. Exactly the woman they expected to see. Slowly she signed the papers. Kofi released a long breath. Relief appeared on his face. It's done, he said quietly. Amina smiled. Everything around the room suddenly felt lighter. Because they believed they had won. Kofi stepped closer. You should rest now. Nola slowly raised her head. Then smiled. But this time, her eyes looked different. No confusion. No fear. Only calm. Kofi's smile disappeared immediately. Because suddenly he understood something was wrong. Very wrong. Nola reached beneath the table. Then pressed a small button. Click. Suddenly voices filled the room. Clear voices. Recorded voices. Kofi's face instantly changed. Amina froze. The doctor looked shocked. Then they heard. She's forgetting everything now. She just needs to sign. Once the property is transferred, everything belongs to us. Silence. Absolute silence. Nobody moved. Nobody spoke. Kofi stared at Nola. No, he whispered. But before he could move, the front door opened. Daniel walked in. Behind him came a police officer. We've had enough. Kofi stepped backward. Amina looked terrified. Because suddenly the hunters realized. They had become the prey. 2 weeks later sunlight filled Nola's tailoring shop again. Sewing machines worked. Customers smiled. Colorful fabrics covered the walls. No cameras. No lies. No fear. Just peace. One morning a young woman entered quietly. Are you Nola? She asked. Nola smiled. Yes. The woman looked emotional. I heard your story. She paused. Thank you for not staying silent. Nola stared at her. Then smiled softly. Because she finally understood something important. Winning wasn't about revenge. Winning wasn't about watching others fall. Winning was about refusing to lose yourself. That evening Nola sat beside the window holding a warm cup of tea. A real cup of tea. No fear. No watching eyes. Just peace. She took a slow sip. Smiled. And looked toward the sunset. Because some stories don't end when you survive. Some begin when you finally become free.